The only way God can use you for his will, for his purposes, for his goodness is if you allow him to do so, because God gives us all free will. He never takes us by force. That's what the enemy does, Satan, but God will never take you by force. God will present you with opportunities, and then it's up to you to take this path or the other path. God will always give you free will. And the only way God can use us is if we surrender to him, is if we submit ourselves to him. And the only way to do that is if we humble ourselves. Without humility, there is a whole load of pride in our lives, and God simply cannot use a person that is full of pride. Pride can show up in your life with many forms. It's a deceiving spirit. Pride is of the enemy. Pride is never of God. And it can show up in our lives in many forms. It can show up in our lives of being so arrogant and so proud, full of your looks, you know, you're too good for everybody. It can show up in the form of your of your successful career. You know, I've worked so hard, I've worked so hard, I've brought myself to this position. I'm too good for everybody else. It can show up in the form of, you know, I want to drive this fancy car, nothing else is good enough for me, I'm too good for anything else. And it can show up in so many things. It can show up in your job, in your personal life, in your looks, in your I will only have the best looking woman on my arm, and nothing else is good enough for me. Why? So I can look and people can glorify me, people can grace me by my status, by the woman on my hand, on my arm, and so on, by my looks, by the way I'm dressed, and everything. It's all about I, me. It's all about the self. And in fact, when Jesus came, he was teaching to crucify the self, and it's not a physical, it's not he was talking about dying to the self, but it's not talking about a physical death. He was talking about a spiritual death, spiritually dying to yourself. Because when you die to yourself, which is all pride and superiority and ego and the I and the me and what I want and how I look and all of that stuff, which is just not of God, it's of the enemy, then when you die to that, now you can make yourself a clear vessel for God's pureness, for God's goodness and grace to flow through you, God's Holy Spirit to flow through you. And that's when God excuse me, and that's when God can use you for his purpose, for his will, for his things. It's like having a water bottle, and the water bottle is filled up to here. God can't pour, let's say the water bottle is filled, God can't pour more water, because it will just all overflow with all that other stuff that's already in there. But once you empty all of that out, and when you empty, in other words, spiritually emptying yourself of self, and you present yourself to God as an empty, you present yourself to God empty of yourself, now God can start pouring his Holy Spirit in you. And that's when God can use you for his goodness, for his will, for his purpose. But as long as, and that bottle represents you, your body. But as long as you're full of yourself, as long as you're full of pride, as long as you're not surrendering to God, as long as you're not presenting yourself in front of God empty of yourself, God just can't use you. So what's he going to do? Is he just going to say, oh, you know what, I can't use Venetia, it's okay. Oh, you know what, I can't use Jason, it's okay. No, God's not going to say that. God's going to create situations where you will be forced to be humbled. And usually humiliation brings that. Have you noticed that when you get humiliated, you like humble yourself a little bit? And so, because that's just how it works. Humiliation brings humility. I'm feeling really hot all of a sudden. Humiliation brings humility. So God might create a situation where where you're forced to humble yourself. Have you noticed you're all proud, you're entering these, I know a lot of people, they're so proud, they're entering these relationships, they think they're so much better than the other person, and then something happens and maybe the other person doesn't want them anymore, they get humiliated in front of people or something, and then all of a sudden they humble themselves, and now they enter the next relationship quieter, you know. So God could create any situation to humble you, and that's not because he hates you or he doesn't care about you, it's so he can humble you, so you can empty yourself of yourself, because all this pride and superiority and ego that is bringing destruction to your life. So you can empty yourself of yourself, so now God can flow through you, he can reside in you, he can operate through you, he can perform miracles and wonders through you. So that's why God does that, because he loves you. And so we'll leave it at that for today. If you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and do so. Click that notification button to get notified when I release a new video, and I will see you again tomorrow.